I had always believed in family. When I married Jake, I thought we were building something solid, a partnership that would last. But as the years passed, I began to feel more like a caretaker than a partner. Jake had always been the breadwinner, while I stayed at home, taking care of our two children, Olivia and Max. At first, I didn't mind. I loved being there for them, making sure they had everything they needed. But slowly, Jake started changing. It wasn't just the long hours at work. It was the way he stopped listening to me, the way he started making decisions without consulting me. We used to talk about everything: where to go on vacation, how to spend our weekends. But now, Jake made those decisions on his own, like I wasn't even part of the equation. I had tried to talk to him about it, tried to explain that I was feeling ignored, but he always brushed me off. One day, it became too much. I came home after running errands to find the house eerily quiet. The kids were at their grandmother's, and Jake wasn't there. I checked my phone and saw a message from him. "Gone on a business trip. Be back in 2 days. Don't worry." It wasn't the fact that he was away that bothered me. It was the coldness of the message, like he was telling me something I was supposed to accept without question. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, my mind racing. What was happening to our marriage? Where was the man I had married? The man who used to care about what I thought, what I wanted. I couldn't find him anymore. In the silence of the house, I realized something. I didn't need to keep living like this. I didn't need to keep waiting for Jake to change. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to be his doormat anymore. I was going to do something for myself. I called a real estate agent and started looking at houses. It wasn't easy. I had always depended on Jake for everything: finances, decisions, even the smallest things. But as I looked through listings, I realized I had been capable all along. I could make decisions on my own. I could create a life for myself without relying on him. 2 days later, when Jake returned home, he found the house a bit emptier than usual. He had assumed everything was fine, that I would still be the same wife he left behind, but things had changed. When he walked in, I was sitting at the kitchen table with papers spread out before me. I was going through the documents for a new house. I looked up at him, and he froze. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice flat. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice steady. "I'm buying a house. I can't live like this anymore." Jake looked confused, then angry. "What do you mean? We're a family. You can't just leave. You're making a huge mistake." "No, Jake," I replied, standing up. "You've made the mistake. You've been making decisions without me for years, and now it's my turn to make one." I thought he might try to stop me, but he didn't. Instead, he just stood there, staring at me like he didn't recognize the woman in front of him. "You can't do this," he muttered. "You'll regret it." I wasn't sure if I would regret it. I wasn't sure of anything anymore. But I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't keep living in the shadow of his indifference. I had to find myself again. I had to be my own person. Over the next few weeks, I started looking for a house. It wasn't easy. There were a lot of things to consider, and I didn't have a lot of experience with real estate. But as I toured houses, I realized I wasn't as lost as I thought. I could do this. I could create a life for me and my kids, one that didn't revolve around Jake's decisions. Finally, I found a place. It wasn't huge, but it was perfect for us. A small, cozy house with a backyard and plenty of space for Olivia and Max to run around. When I told the kids about the move, they were excited. They didn't fully understand what was going on, but they knew it was something good. And that was all I needed. When Jake found out, he was furious. He accused me of being selfish, of tearing our family apart. But I didn't let him manipulate me anymore. I stood my ground. I had been putting up with his neglect for too long, and I wasn't going to apologize for choosing my happiness. The move was exhausting. There were so many things to sort through. Years of memories, things we had accumulated over time. But every box I packed, every item I moved, felt like a step toward my new life. I wasn't just leaving Jake behind. I was leaving a version of myself that had been lost for far too long. I was reclaiming who I was. The day we moved in, I felt a mix of emotions: relief, excitement, and fear. This was a new beginning, but it was also a big change. I had no idea how things would go, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own destiny. Jake didn't take the news well. He tried to contact me, tried to talk me into coming back, but I didn't answer his calls. I had heard all the empty promises before. He was just trying to manipulate me into staying in the same toxic situation. A week after I moved in, I received an unexpected visitor. It was Jake. He showed up at my door with an angry look on his face. "What are you doing, Emily? You can't just leave like this. We're married. You're my wife," he shouted. "I'm not your wife anymore, Jake," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "You stopped being my husband a long time ago." His face turned red, and for a moment I thought he might get violent, but he didn't. He just stood there, shaking his head. "You're making a mistake. You're going to regret this." "I don't think so," I said. "I'm finally living the life I deserve, a life without you controlling every move I make." Jake left, slamming the door behind him, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of freedom. It was like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I wasn't tied to someone who didn't appreciate me anymore. I was free. But just when I thought I could finally breathe easy, I got a phone call. It was from Jake's lawyer. Apparently, Jake had filed for divorce. He was trying to claim the house, claiming I had left him with nothing. I wasn't surprised. I knew he would do everything he could to manipulate the situation in his favor. But this time, I wasn't going to back down. I had the house, the kids, and the strength to fight for what was mine. I had already made up my mind. No matter what Jake threw at me, I wasn't going to let him win. I hired a lawyer and started preparing for the fight. It wasn't going to be easy. I knew Jake would pull every trick in the book to try to turn things around, but I was done being his doormat. I was done being the woman who silently suffered while he made all the decisions. This time, I was fighting for myself. As the weeks went on, things started to heat up. Jake's lawyer kept sending papers, trying to scare me into submission. But I wasn't afraid. I had been living in fear for far too long. Now I was ready to take control of my life, no matter what it took. The divorce process dragged on for months. But as each day passed, I felt stronger. I was building a life for myself and my kids, one decision at a time. The fight wasn't just about the house or the money. It was about my dignity, my freedom, and my future. And then one day the phone call came. Jake had finally agreed to the divorce settlement. He had backed down. The house was mine, and I would keep full custody of the kids. I couldn't believe it. It was over. I hung up the phone, feeling a rush of relief and pride. I had done it. I had fought for myself and won. I was finally free from Jake's control, and I could move forward with my life. That night, I sat down with Olivia and Max and told them the good news. They were thrilled. They didn't fully understand what had happened, but they knew their mom was happy, and that was all that mattered. As I looked around the house, I realized that this was just the beginning. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. And no matter what the future held, I knew one thing for certain. I was strong enough to face it on my own.